Carrie Spittler is Executive Director of Snow City Arts and is here to tell us a bit more about that organization. Thank you so much for being here, Carrie.
Absolutely. Thank you, Barry. And we're grateful to the Wheaton Public Library for having us join you today. Um, for those of you who are new to our work, Snow City Arts inspires and educates children and youth in the hospital. And we do that by working with our team, which is cross-disciplinary, a team of 7 teaching artists who cover music, theater, creative writing, media arts, and also visual arts, which you'll see a little bit and make a little bit of today. And we work in 3 Chicagoland hospitals, and we've spent the last 3 years also at Northwestern Memorial Central DuPage Hospital. So some of what you'll see today is a project that we've been doing with some young people while they're spending the time in the hospital, whether that's just a brief one-night stay or maybe a multi-night stay. Our mission is that we really want to support their learning while they're away from the classroom, whether it be virtual or live. So everything we do is benchmarked to state and federal learning standards. We send reports out to schools so that young people can gain credit for everything they do with us and not fall behind their peers. Just want to thank a couple of folks who make our work possible out at Central DuPage and who made today's program possible as well. So certainly the DuPage Foundation. Today's program is also part of the Arts DuPage Festival. I hope you're enjoying some other programs as well. And I'd also like to recognize Leslie and Mary Weiberg, who have been very generous to us in our work at the hospital itself. Also want to just recognize and call out there are a number of Snow City Arts staff people joining us today. I hope they'll rename themselves if they haven't to include Snow City Arts in their name. So if you have questions about our work, you should feel free to add a question to the chat or send us a direct chat, and we'd be happy to share more about our work. And then I would invite you going forward in these virtual times, Snow City Arts has also shifted to doing some work in new and I think really fun ways. So please visit our website at snowcityarts.org. There are 2 ways to engage with us there. We have one-way videos that can be done at home or in the hospital or at a school. And then we also have a really fun link where you can sign up to actually do a virtual one-on-one workshop with one of our teaching artists. So our mission is really focused on children and youth, but we recognize that right now is an interesting moment. So if you have folks who are interested, children and youth who are interested in working with us, please sign up. And I'll end there. And thank you again, Barry, for having us.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much, Carrie. Our teaching artist today is Monica Acosta. Monica graduated from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago with a bachelor's degree in fine arts and interior architecture. Monica primarily works with water-soluble mediums and considers her art to be graphic journaling, edging towards surrealism. Monica has been a visual teaching artist with Snow City Arts for the past year. As a teaching artist, she aspires to open up the students' minds to being present in the doing and making of art rather than feeling limited by formal technicalities. Monica believes that everyone can be empowered through creativity where the definition is infinite. And now we will turn the program over to Monica. We are really looking forward to this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Barry, for that introduction. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. And so let's begin. So the whole idea of Zen principles to art making, or the essence, really, if I can share with you, is doing one thing at a time. And in order to be fully aware, you give that one task your full attention. And a good example of this is if you decide to take a walk, just walk. or if you decide that you're going to make something to eat, put your full attention in the preparation, cutting the vegetables, how that feels, cooking, the smelling. So basically, it's just being all aware and being all present in that one particular thing that you've decided to do. In that present moment, it's the fullest expression of kindness because you're being aware of who you are and what you're doing at that time. And also there is this idea that when in doing this with art making, it's the idea of no ego. And so when I'm doing these studies, it's like exercising before a run. It'll take me about 4 times to do this type of study to be able to get my mindset in the present moment. This is the time where I ask myself, what is the quality of my doing? I'm being aware of my breathing, how my arm is connected to the brush. And also in these studies or exercises, it's not about like or dislike. It's more about really the present moment. It's not about form or content. It's not about end result. It's just more about just having and enjoying the moment where you're connecting with water, paint, your canvas. So if I can invite you to just sit for a moment, and we're going to take a deep breath, and we're going to give ourselves permission to just be in the present moment, taking everything out, no grocery lists or anything. We're going to first take a deep breath, and then I'm going to guide you through the second breath. So if we can, just feet planted on the ground, and you're going to inhale a deep breath and let it move through your body. And then you're going to exhale. We're going to take another breath as I take you through a guided example. Again, feet planted and rooted to the ground. We are going to take a deep breath, and we're going to think of clarity as that breath moves through our body. Be aware of the breath as it's moving up towards the center of your body, into your arms. Whether you physically or you imagine your arms spreading out to the sky. Again, offering up that clarity, present moment, spreading out like a tree, letting go. As you exhale, coming to center with your arms. No ego. So at this point, I'm going to switch to my work surface so you won't see me, but you'll see me at the end. And we will begin our workshop. So this is my workspace. Can everyone see this okay?
Yes.
So great. Okay. So the first step. So as a screen share, can everyone see this first step that says yellow wash? Excellent. Okay. So in the camera, we're going to hold our brush, and it's going to be 3 fingers on the bottom and a thumb to support that. And what I want you to do is get used to this rotating from the arm and just being aware of how it's connected. Again, with exercising, I think about this just becoming comfortable with my brush. This is a good way of doing it. And then what we're going to be doing is we're going to start with painting your surface or your canvas, this 8x8 canvas, with plain water. And what this allows me to do is to just connect with my breathing. Anytime we want to bring ourselves back to present, breathing is always a great exercise. It allows you to just inhale a nice breath and then exhale. And then if you can imagine just the exercise that we did with exhaling is no ego. So we're going to start by painting with plain water, and then practice getting comfortable going back and forth just with water, as well as rotating your brush. And just take a moment to just do that with the surface. Flat, rotating your brush. And if you notice my brush, it's pretty much up and down, but then laying flat, I'm just getting all angles of this brush, connecting with the water, just relaxing into it. Just thinking how kind it is that you have chosen to do this with spending time with yourself. Art making, coming down again, rotating that brush. And with the flat brush, you can get really wide markings, as well as slowly angling it. You'll be able to get thin lines as well. And that technique is going to be needed more towards the end of the workshop. So now for the yellow wash, what I'm going to do is I'm using my brush for everything, whether it's scooping, mixing, and just painting, keeping everything pretty minimal and simple. I'm going to create a puddle on my dish here as I prepare for the yellow wash. I'm going to set my brush down a little bit. And it's always a good practice between each step to remove the excess water from your brush. I'm going to take the yellow paint and I'm going to squeeze a good amount, just like that. Just thinking in my mind, making enough wash to complete a layer. And then I'm going to scoop with the tip of my brush into the puddle and just interacting with how I'm mixing the paint. You're going to see a clump of paint on your paintbrush. Just go ahead and dip it into water and you want a smooth consistency. A little bit thicker than milk, like almost like cream. This is a nice time to just be aware of how water connects with the paint and how your brush is mixing that. And then you want to also make sure that you have your brush loaded with enough paint. And then we are going to start with our first color here. And so if you could eyeball halfway on your canvas and then go about a brush stroke above that. And then you're just going to lay down your paint back and forth. You can go one direction. This is really more about what you're feeling comfortable with. If you need to dip your brush back into the water, go ahead. When I do these studies, I like painting with these thin washes. We can always deepen the color, but the light washes just help me connect with the depth or the richness or the color of what I'm trying to achieve. And just come all the way down. being aware of how your arm and your brush is connected. And if you feel your body swaying back and forth, just allow it. It becomes like a dance. That feels pretty good. So I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to move on to the second step, which is the orange wash. And what we're going to do is on the opposite end, we're going to try and keep our colors clean. We're going to choose a spot on our, I'm going to need my, on our dish where we're going to place a dollop of red opposite of where the yellow is. Again, with these studies, I enjoy using the primary colors because it just allows me to really connect with the colors I'm making for these studies. It's going to blot my brush. I'm going to make another yellow puddle, and this is for the orange layer. Yellow and red make the color orange. So again, I'm going to make a puddle right about here. And I want it to be enough to where I can finish the orange layer. And I'm going to first take the tip of my brush and mix it into the yellow. And get that mixed in with the water. Get as much as you can off into the water and paint mixture. And then before I dip my color into the red to make the orange, I'm going to clean my brush off. This helps keep the colors clean. And you only need a tiny bit of the red to make orange. I'm just going to show you. It's a lot goes a long way. So I have a tiny bit of red, and then just see how those colors interact. If you want it more orange, add the yellow. If you like this color, go ahead and use it. I'm going to add a little bit more yellow to make it orange. I'm going to wash or clean my brush again before I dip it into the yellow. It's getting to be more where I want that color. And again, mix these two colors until you achieve that color that you want to use, that you imagine your sunset to be. And once you get that color, what we're going to do before you commit to using this color on your canvas, I'm going to ask you to wash your brush again, and we're going to paint with the plain water. Again, this just helps connect with each of the layers. And just with plain water, an inch below the yellow, I'm going to paint with plain water. And why I like doing this is because it allows the paint, once it hits the surface, to move across. I like each of my layers to be soft layers, and so the water helps that. And then when you are ready, when you feel comfortable enough to commit to the paint, go ahead and load your bristles up with enough of the colored. to finish this layer. So I'm just going to go ahead and just notice how the color interacts. Again, be aware of your breathing as your brush moves side to side and just relax into the process. These washes, doing this for the sunset, creates a nice base for when you use other water soluble mediums. And this is why I like using acrylics first. So I'm going to clean off my brush and then blot it. And then I'm going to pick up my canvas and I'm just going to just rotate it like this and just watch the colors blend together. You can either lay it flat, do this, paint over it, but this is just, as you're doing this, you're just deciding at which point you want to allow it to rest. I'm liking the effect that's happening. This is what's fun about working really wet as well. Again, I will do these studies before I actually commit to one that is more detailed. I'll go through at least 4 or 5 of these exercises, and they're different every time. I'm going to set that down and let it rest a little bit. For the next color, we're going to be using red over this wash. What we're doing is we're going to be establishing a horizon line. And what the horizon line is it's the point where the sky meets the water. And so in this sunset study, red would be a good way to be able to differentiate the horizon line between the water or the sky between the water. Want to make sure that my brush is clean again. And as we continue to do these layers with clean water, at this point, now that you have your surface painted, you don't want drippy water. You want it just sort of a dampness to your bristles as you continue with your layers. So I'm going to dip my brush in water and then just blot it again. Just making sure that it's not too drippy. And then 1 inch below I'm going to come to the next one here. 1 inch below the orange line is where I'm going to paint with plain water and get it ready for the red. All the way across. Again, I'm going to create a puddle on my dish where we're going to use the red. Think of it as like a vegetable pea size amount. Blend that well. If you need a little bit more water, go ahead. Again, I like my paint and water mixture to be smooth. That seems pretty good. It's a little thicker than milk consistency. Loading your brush a generous amount of red. An inch below the orange, I'm going to commit to my paint and then come all the way down. These colors are yummy. Sometimes you get a lot of paint on one end. Go ahead, feel free to smoothen it out. If you like it where it's thicker on one end, or just the different variations, keep it. I like it. I like when I see all the colors together blended. And I'm going to clean my brush off again, blot the excess water. I'm going to pick up the canvas and then just help it along, allowing the colors to move. Just like so. And then when I like how that looks, I'm going to go ahead and set it down and let it rest. So at this point, this would be a good opportunity to dry this surface so that we could make the value of a painting is the light or dark of how your painting is. And so for the horizon line, I want to add a little bit more detail. But before I do this, I'm going to dry that surface before I put a second layer. Anytime that you add a layer to your painting, it'll make the color darker. So I'm going to take my hairbrush here and dry it just like this. I'm going to put that on mute so that we're not all hearing. So we are going to do one more layer of red and yellow to enhance the detail of the horizon line before we change our waters and start using the cool washes. So now that it's dry enough for me to be able to, again, just in the top part of this red and just this one stroke across, I'm going to paint with plain water before I commit to paint. And then I'm going to dip it into my red paint. And create that line. And then I'm going to do the same thing I'm going to clean my brush off. And in that my surface is wet already, blot the excess water, dip it into the yellow. And paint your yellow right into that section as well. I'm going to need a little bit more yellow, and I'm going to bring my canvas up to camera so you can see the interaction between yellow and red. It's creating a really nice detail. When you like how that looks, put it down, let it rest, clean your brush off really, really well, blot it. this will be a good time to actually get up, stretch, change your water. Make sure that you start off with clean water again before we do the cool washes. I'm going to switch back to the camera. Hello. So yes, if you need to go ahead and change your water, you can do so. How's everyone doing? Feeling pretty relaxed? Great. Again, if any thoughts come in, awesome. If thoughts come in where it's, I'm not liking, I'm not disliking, get up, do some breathing exercises. And then when you're ready to come back again, come back to it. Again, this is just more about connecting with water, paint, breathing, the brush, even the sounds that the brush makes on the canvas. And when everyone comes back, give me a thumbs up. Great. I'm going to switch it back. Actually, what I'm going to do now, switching it back to my work surface. Is my screen share still on? Just great. So the next slide, we're going to move into the cool colors, and we are creating the background. So now what we have is we have a horizon line where the sky meets the water. Now we are working on the background, which we will be calling sky. And this is going to be a graduated wash technique, and I'll show you how to do that. So we're going to start again with the clean brush. And then far, like on the opposite end where the yellow and red is, we want to create an area for your blue. So I'm going to do it over here in this corner. My particular dish, all the waters tend to want to blend together. I'm using a casserole dish. And I'm just going to squeeze a nice amount, a little bit over a quarter size dollop. And then just like before, we're going to paint with plain water before we commit to the paint. Painting with plain water helps me be aware of my breathing, helps me to relax. So starting from the top of my canvas, again, just plain water, being aware of my arm connected to the brush, and allow your body and your arm to engage in the movement of how the brush moves back and forth. And I'm going to come right before the yellow. I'm going to make a puddle of water for the blue wash right next to the blue, just like this. And dipping the tip of my brush into the paint. And again, I'm going to interact with how that water mixes with the blue. I love the sound of the bristles just mixing the paint and the water and how that sounds when it's mixing. That looks pretty good. And again, I'm checking, as I'm loading my bristles, I'm checking to make sure that there's not huge clumps of paint on my brush. I'm going to do 2 rows of this blue before I do clean water. Go ahead and commit to the paint color on top. And you can go the other direction too. I'm going to need to wet that just a tiny bit more. And if you find the same thing where it's a little bit dry, go ahead and just paint it with a little bit more water. You want thin washes. Again, I'm going to scoop up some paint, get a generous amount of paint on my bristles, and right over that, we're going to paint another layer of blue. And then we're going to clean our brush off, and the rest of the way is just going to be plain water. And you will see it's going to be right underneath the blue, just like this. And you'll see how the paint blooms into where you have painted just the blue, painted where you just painted with the plain water. And again, you're going to come all the way down. And it's called the graduated wash technique because it's darker on the top and it becomes lighter as you come down. Just going to smooth out my paint here, just like that. And same with the other layers. I'm going to pick it up and rotate it. And what I'm doing here by rotating it, just pretty much establishing the movement, creating some different lines and details. We're going to be doing a lot of drawing within these layers here, just so that we can get 2 layers. And if you do these exercises or these studies again, I'm doing 2 layers for this workshop, but as you do more layers, your colors will become darker, or the value of your colors will become darker. For this purpose though, we're just going to do 2 layers. We're going to dry this layer and then we're going to do a second layer before we start in again with the water. Okay, now we're going to do a second layer on that blue to just create a deeper value for the blue. Again, I'm going to make sure that my brush is loaded with a generous amount of blue paint. And I'm going to do 2 rows of that before I paint with plain water. Got the 2 rows, and now I'm going to clean my brush off, do the graduated technique again, and just paint all the way down before the yellow with the plain water. And again, go back and forth and do this until you like the way that sky looks. I'm going to switch. So now that we have our horizon line and our background, we are going to work developing the details of the middle ground, which is the bottom of the horizon line, or I'm sorry, where the horizon line actually meets the water, down into the bottom of the canvas, which we are calling the foreground. So anything in the foreground is in your eye when you're looking at something, is all the things that are closer to you. And then it moves back into the horizon line, which is the middle ground. So this is where we are going to create a purple wash by either using what we have here with the red, making sure you want to make sure that your brush is clean. A little puddle of water right next to the red. You might need the red for something else. Dipping the corner of your brush into the red. And to make purple, I would start with using a little bit more red than you would the blue, and it's going to be a tiny bit of blue, like how we did with the orange. When you're mixing darker colors into the lighter colors, it doesn't take a lot for the darker color to create the hue. That looks pretty good. I'm going to clean my brush off before I mix it into the blue. Again, it's going to be a tiny bit. You can always add more blue depending on how you like the purple hue that you're going to make. It's a little bit. And I'm going to add blue until I like the color that I'm mixing. I think I like that. I'm going to clean my brush again, and we are going to change the directions of our strokes. And we're going to paint with plain water as we practice up and down or vertical stroke. So again, in that we are using water over a painted surface, we just want our bristles damp. And we're going to start leaving a little bit of the red. Let's say that's like a 1/2 inch. Start painting up and down strokes. You can rotate and do the other way. And we're just establishing this area of the middle ground to foreground. I always like to wet the area with plain water before I commit to paint. We're leaving a little bit of that red line that we made. I've got some clumps of water. I'm just going to smooth those out a little bit before I commit to my paint. Okay. Again, just wet the bristles a little bit. Load your bristles with a generous amount of paint to complete the layer. And then when you're comfortable, go ahead and commit the paint to this area that you painted with plain water. Get comfortable with your vertical strokes. I like using different directions when I'm doing my water scenes. It adds a nice texture. Again, if you feel like you're running out of paint, go ahead and just make some more. It's okay. We're going to do a second layer. So I'm going to go ahead and make some more paint for myself with the purple. Cleaning off my brush, dipping it into the red before I put some blue. Okay, I'm going to add some blue to my purple. Oops, I think I did too much there. And I want my purple area to be a little bit darker. I'm rotating my brush and using the other side. And that's the thing about doing these studies is if you feel more comfortable just doing one direction, or if you want to rotate your brush to get the paint from the other side, it's pretty much how you're feeling and how you're connecting. That feels pretty good. So I am going to dry this layer. I've got 2 layers. Again, if you were to be doing this exercise again, as many layers as you want to deepen the value. I tend to think that for it to be darker, I'll go about 5 layers and then allowing it to actually dry naturally. I'm using the hairbrush now, but there's also just a different connect feeling when you're allowing the layers to dry naturally as well. I'm gonna rotate a little bit. Again, I'm going to put mine on mute as I dry this layer. Okay. I'm going to share the next slide. So for the foreground detail, we're going to rotate our canvas just like this. I'm going to turn it upside down. And we're going to use blue washes to create the foreground detail. And it's going to be the graduated wash like we did with the sky. If you need to activate the blue a little bit, add some water. This feels pretty good. Sometimes it dries up a little. You just use that water again. And before I, again, commit to the paint color, I'm going to paint with plain water. I'm just starting from the top here. all the way just like that, right to where that purple stops between the horizon line. I'm going to load my bristles again with generous amount of paint. We're going to do 2 rows before we paint with plain water. Spread that out. Do another one. I'm dipping my brush in the water, cleaning it off a little bit. And the rest of the way to finish off the purple is just going to be the plain water. I'm going to pick it up. I'm going to play around with the movement of the blue with the wet water until it seems and feels right. And when you like it, just go ahead and set it down and let it rest. See how wet these layers get. And then what we're going to do is we're going to dry this layer and we're going to rotate our canvas again. There's a water puddle on the tip of my canvas. I'm just going to let it be. This next slide I'm going to show you is how we see perspective. I'm going to turn this around. And if you imagine in perspective a triangle, it's an imaginary triangle. The largest part of your triangle is at the bottom here and your foreground. And it comes to a point to where the sun is. And so the shapes in front of you are larger. And I'm keeping these shapes simple, and they're going to be soft triangles, and they are larger, and it gets gradually smaller as it goes towards the horizon line or towards the sun. And I'll show you how to paint that in this next step. We're going to be using the blue paint again. And this is where you're going to rotate your brush to get the full width of what a flat brush can do. So I'm going to paint with plain water before I commit to the color. And I'm going to start down here in my foreground. And my brush is flat up and down. And I'm going to twist it just a little bit. And as I get to the point of my sideways triangle, it's going to be pretty much flat, just like that. When we do that, we're going to do this again. You can look at the shape that you made. If you like that, you can commit to paint. But I'm going to do that again. And then you go flat. Or I'm sorry, flat to where it's a point. And then where I've painted with the plain water, I'm going to go ahead and load my bristles. And I'm going to commit to paint in that area. And you'll see how that paint moves in that shape. And then moving on to the second one, as it moves towards the middle ground, same thing, I'm going to paint with water. And this time I'm going to start with my brush where it's straight up and down and flat, gradually rotate so that the bigger part of the triangle is opposite of what I did the first time. Just like that. We're rotating. I'm going to do that again. My point for the triangle, and I'm going to rotate it so it gets bigger. And then I'm going to commit that shape that I just made to the paint. And I need to make mine a little darker. And same thing with these shapes is that you lay the first layer down, you can always come back and make it more detailed. So those are the two big triangles. Now they're going to get gradually smaller markings as it moves towards the middle ground into the horizon line. So then I'm using the plain water. And at this point, it's going to be at a slight angle. I'm right about here. And again, there's no, I'm just doing this by feel.
Monica, if you wouldn't mind just going over the perspective part again, just explaining
Sure.
how you're choosing to do that.
Okay, I'm going to go back to this image here, and I'm keeping my soft triangles within this shape of the triangle. And so the larger triangles in the front or the foreground here are larger. And then as it moves back into the triangle shape, it becomes gradually smaller. Does that, so it's just sort of a guide. The triangle is a guide to how those markings move into the middle ground.
Great, thank you.
Sure. Would it be helpful to keep this perspective page up?
Maybe as you just keep painting a couple more of the triangles, maybe that would be helpful.
Sure. So again, I'm going to paint with the water and I'm going to make them smaller. And the way that you control your brush is the amount of how you rotate it. So my second triangle, and once I lay that color down, I might be able to see that more. These markings become more just lines as they move into the middle ground. I'm going to do one right here. It's going to be a smaller one. And at this point, it's really just a flat line. So now that I have the first layer of these markings, I'm going to go ahead and just make them a little bit darker, creating more detail. I'm going to move on to, sorry, this last one. And color lifting, what I'm doing now with the color lifting is creating more light and dark details in our sunset. I'll go back. So then if you see like where the triangles are, there's some light spots. And those are what I'm creating with the color lifting. So I'm going to go back to this slide here. And what we're going to do is we're going to clean our brush off and we're going to blot it. It should be damp, but not very wet. And you're just going to rub it across the surface. And it's going to create some light lines. Where the highlights of the sun just hits these areas of the water. Waves have a shape, and so the sun will glisten the tops of these waves. And the color lifting is a nice way to create that foundation to be able to put detail markings. Is everyone seeing this? I'm just using my bristles and I'm just scraping it across the surface. And I'm lifting up the color. Just like so. This last slide I'm going to show you, this is basically what we've created here now, is the foundation for being able to further detail with other water-soluble materials. And so I'm going to introduce to you things that I like to do that with on these bases. And again, I've gone through, there's just different ways of doing this. And I will continue to do this study at this level or this exercise at this level until something feels like I want to connect with it in order to create detail. So I'm going to introduce to you two mediums that I love to work with, and they're called watercolor pastels. And you can also use watercolor pencils, and it works really, really nicely with being able to do detail layers. And for this one, I'll show you how both watercolor pencils and water-soluble pastels work this way. So this basically is now what I've created as my base or foundation in this acrylic base. And this makes a nice surface for detailing what this sunset could look like. And at this point, like with these, I like to let these rest. I come back into it at different moments because it always takes on a different life. So I'm just going to, since this one is drying, I'll just show you how these pastels work. So here I've got one that's dry, and like in the blue area, I'm going to take this pastel, and this is what's nice about working with these, is I can develop or sculpt these areas like so, or in here, create even more details and lights and lights and darks with these, just like that. And then come in with my brush and then soften them up. Just like so. But for the base of what this is how I do all my studies first before I go into the detail. Like the detail is definitely a different Zen mindset. But to do these base foundations and these exercises is just a great way of stretching before you actually move into a painting or a subject. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and, hi, I'm back. So this would probably be a good time to ask, do a questions and answering and things like that, since now we are finished with this study and this exercise. How did that feel for everyone?
Thank you so much, Monica. We really enjoyed that. I'm just going to remind people to go ahead and open up your chat. So if you'd like to enter any questions, you can go ahead and do that there. I just thought I'd jump in with a question here, Monica. Those watercolor pencils or pastels that you used at the end, were those black and white, or what colors would you use for that?
So these, since we used primary colors for the base or the foundation of the acrylics, it's a great moment to start using really any color that feels right for highlighting or accenting the details. So I usually have, let's see, in my colors, I have just a whole, I like usually red, the light blues, yellows, hues that normally, you can get a certain amount of hues with the primary colors. So having these on hand just accents it. And it's really a fun way to go back and forth with creating colors. But a good answer would probably be the like orange, purples, even pinks, the blue, which I would not typically make with the primary colors. So anything that you can't make with the primary colors, these are great.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. And I tend to work more in watercolor. Could you do this similarly in watercolor instead of acrylic?
Yes, absolutely. What I find though, in my practice, I work really, really wet. And so the paper will have a saturation, your watercolor paper will have a certain saturation point where you could, like it just starts getting muddy. And so I found that these canvas panels are a great way to work as wet as you want, but you can also work with the watercolors on these panels. If you want to work with watercolor paper, 300-pound is a good one that'll take a lot of wet water technique.
Right,
if you want to stick with the watercolors.
Right, because the watercolor paper absorbs so much more of the water. Yeah, that makes sense. We've got many positive comments coming in, Monica. Thank you. Someone's just mentioning how difficult it can be as we're painting to turn off our judgment of ourselves, and any tips that you might have for that.
Usually when I start starting, the thoughts are what creates this is what a wonderful thing about the whole idea of no ego is that it's those thoughts that start generating. And so when you remind yourself, what is the quality of my doing in these exercises, you can step back and basically make that choice with the no ego to release the whole idea of like or dislike or judgment. And then just remind yourself, we're just exercising here. We're just studying. We're just connecting. We're breathing. And so when you've made that choice to have this time to just do that, you're able to relax into it more. And if that happens where those thoughts come in, I encourage you to just start breathing and take yourself away from the area, take a walk, and coming back into it with a fresh mind.
Thank you.
And again, just it's the thoughts, and it's hard to not become distracted. But the more you exercise this, it actually you'll start becoming a lot more aware of full attention to what you're doing.
Thank you. Yes, and several people have commented how relaxing it was. Someone made the comment, it's a lot like yoga in that way. And perhaps part of that is just working with the colors and not creating any particular shapes. So very, very helpful. We'll wait just one more minute to see if anyone has any other questions, but we certainly want to say thank you to Snow City Arts and especially to you, Monica, for all the time and effort. It takes a lot to put these things together. So thank you so much for that. And thank you for the kits that allowed us to participate in this way. Again, this program has been recorded, and so it will be available on the library YouTube page within a week so that you could watch it again, maybe do another color study as Monica's recommended, or recommend it to a friend. So again, I see lots of positive comments in the chat, but no more questions. So I think we are done for this afternoon. Thank you so much. This was just lovely. A wonderful way to spend the afternoon. I don't know if Snow City Arts needs to say anything else before we close today. I don't think so. So again, to all of our registrants, we will be sending out the link to the YouTube page where the recording will appear, and also links to Snow City Arts website and a couple of other wonderful resources that they have for you. But thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It's been a wonderful, relaxing, artful, creative afternoon. Everybody take care and have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.
Thank you for letting me in your space.